So great pride, because of course coming from the party is essential for the GSLP. I mean, the election of a leader is something that happens every 2 years when we haven't got a pandemic and we haven't got to cancel our AGMs. So I was gearing up for that night. I put my name forward, nobody else put their name forward. Therefore I knew that I would enjoy the support of the majority of the party. And great pride in the work that I've done in the past 10 years as party leader, 9 3/4 of which have been spent as the GSLP Liberal Chief Minister of Gibraltar. Great sadness at the fact that so many of the people who were there that night, who I held dear, are no longer with us. I mean, looking at the pictures in the past 24 hours just reminded me of that, and my mum's there. Juan Carlos is there, Luis de Rio is there, Charles Busson is in the pictures, Maribel Chelaram's in the pictures. They've all gone. So happiness, pride and sadness.
Well, let's just rewind to when Joe Bossano, as he was then, stepped down from the party a month earlier at the AGM. He had the real hardcore support of that party. How did you convince the executive that you were the one to be in the driving seat?
I don't think that you can speak of Joe Bossano in the past tense when it comes to the support of the hardcore of the party. Joe Bossano is the founder of the party. He's still, in his 80s, an elected member of the party in its executive and in the parliament for the party. So, please don't write Joe Bossano off, because he's very much a part of the present, and therefore what was important was that people in the party should see that they were not being asked to transition from one set of beliefs and ideology. They were being asked to continue a set of beliefs and ideology. Look, two men, even if they are twins, will not do things in identical ways. I haven't yet grown my mustache. But we believe in the same things, and we might do the same things in different ways. We might sometimes even argue about how best to do things. I mean, people should not be surprised that there are arguments in political parties. I mean, political parties are about democracy, and in democracy you have to have arguments in order to reach and fashion the best argument in order to be able to do things in the best way. That's what democracy is all about. And so I wanted the party to understand that I would not try to shut down debate, that I would be as open as Joe had been on the ability of the party to always express itself democratically to its executive and through its executive to its elected members, that would be true to the principles that the GSLP had brought into government in 1988, which had been so successful in reshaping the Gibraltar economy, and that we would bring the energy also of that first GSLP government of 88 to 96 to the way in which I would run the executive, in the way in which I would expect the party to be geared up for the general election, and the approach we would take to government if we were to win the election in 2011, which, as we all know, we did by 200 votes.
Well, you're quite right. Joe Bossano, Sir Joe as he is now, is still a very big presence in the party, and I certainly haven't written him off. But as a 39-year-old, it must have been quite hard to step out from his shadow, as it were, and you talked about sometimes you don't agree on certain policies and directions, but has it been hard to put your own stamp on the party?
So Joe Bossano doesn't cast a shadow, he casts a glow. And we don't disagree about policies or direction. What I'm saying is that in any democratic institution, it is right that there should be debate and argument about how you fashion a policy and a direction of travel, how you polish it and make it better. That's what debate is all about. And because I've always had that approach, I've never felt that I was in his shadow. That might be the shorthand way of describing my role in politics. But look, if you're going to describe me as being in Joe Bossano's shadow, given that he is such a titan of Gibraltar politics, I think everybody would be cast in his shadow, as we might be cast in the shadow of Sir Joshua or in the shadow of Sir Peter.
May I just say, I meant as a 39-year-old, certainly not now, just to get that clear.
I feel no different.
Some people say that there are two factions within the GSLP. There's Camp Joe Bossano and Camp Fabian Picardo. Is that true?
That's absolutely not true. There are 5,000 factions in the GSLP because every one of our members has their own view of something. They express their views to us either on the street or on emails or through social media or otherwise directly. There is no such thing as a Bossano faction and a Picardo faction. In fact, a better analysis might be that Picardo and Bossano are actually quite close in their approach, that they want to deliver the same things. Sometimes they might use different words to express the same concept in order to deliver it in one way or another, but that actually the last 10 years has demonstrated that we are much closer than our political opponents might like to pretend we are, and they haven't been able to get a hair between us in the past 10 years despite talking up these alleged differences that never materialize.
Okay, well, let's go back to 2011. The year you became GSLP leader, you also became Chief Minister of Gibraltar. How daunting was that for you to take over the mantle from Peter Caruana, Sir Peter, as he is now, who had been Chief Minister for 16 years? How daunting was that for you, particularly as you sat opposite him in Parliament for many years, and then when you became Chief Minister, there he was opposite you?
I don't know what was harder, taking over from Joe Bossano or taking over from Peter Caruana. Both of them, within a few years of my having become leader of the party and then become Chief Minister, both of them knighted by Her Majesty the Queen for their enormous contributions to Gibraltar. So these are two political heavyweights who used to go at each other hammer and tongs, and there was I stepping into the ring, into the red corner, saying, "Punch me now." And that was probably the toughest year that I've experienced. I was still in practice as a lawyer. I was in the ring as Peter Caruana's opponent in Parliament, now directly. And the general election was coming, and that was very, very, very tough indeed. I don't think Peter Caruana, who I get on with a lot better now that he is not a parliamentarian, I don't think Peter Caruana will tell you that he gave me an easy ride as leader of the opposition. Neither would I have expected one. I don't think you would have got the best out of me as leader of the opposition if I had had an easy ride. In fact, I may have lost the election if I had been lulled into insecurity by Peter Caruana. But he was a formidable Chief Minister of Gibraltar in the way that he held the reins tight. I do things in a completely different way. I believe in the power of my executive and my cabinet, and in the way that my cabinet is able to give effect to the policies of the parties that make up the GSLP Liberal coalition in government. And I'm just completely different. And I think that the key thing for anybody who is going to succeed, a giant like Sir Joe Bossano or a giant like Sir Peter Caruana, is to not fall into the trap of pretending for one moment to be either of them. You will fail if you try and be... Fabian Picardo would have failed if he tried to be Joe Bossano, and Fabian Picardo would have failed if he tried to be Peter Caruana. Fabian Picardo has to be Fabian Picardo. He can be better or worse as leader of the party or as Chief Minister in people's perceptions as Fabian Picardo, but he will be absolutely terrible if he tries to imitate Joe Bossano or Peter Caruana.
I always had a sense, though...
That's why I never do like this. When I get into this.
I always had a sense, though, whenever you would criticise Sir Peter, I always had a sense that underneath that you did hold him really in the highest esteem. Is that... Did you?
I didn't just in the past. I do even now. Look, I fully understand that you can have a different political ideology and come from a different political tradition and yet respect the manner in which the other fellow is achieving his objective, and indeed even agree with the principle that is being established. Look, Joe Bossano said something in 2002 in Parliament, I think it was in 2002, which is often overlooked. I wasn't elected then, and he repeated it when I was elected, and it was even more impacting to me when I was in Parliament, but it was impacting even when I heard it from outside. Joe Bossano said to Peter Caruana, if he ever had a problem with the United Kingdom, he said, before they get to you, they have to get through me. So you can have that respect for the fact that what the other guy is doing is defending the homeland, doing it in his own way. You can have the respect for the fact that even though you disagree with the way the policy that he's going to give effect to, you can have political respect for the way that he achieves his objective. And I have that in droves for Peter Caruana and in double droves for Joe Bossano. But yeah, I wouldn't stop there. I mean, I look back at the history of Gibraltar. I've got huge respect for what Sir Joshua did. I've got huge respect for what Bob Belisa did. In 3 short years, Bob Belisa, remember the IWP government facing a closed frontier and no ability to spend money like a modern government of Gibraltar is able to spend money, because they had very little in terms of revenue. So Hassan and Belisa also have to be put in that context and understood in that context and respected in that context. You're not able to do the job of Chief Minister today if you haven't studied the work of former Chief Ministers and learned from what they did, learn from what they did right, learn from what they tell us they did wrong, and also where we might also think they might have got things wrong in order not to make those mistakes in the future.
Well, you have 2 very, very big jobs, Chief Minister of Gibraltar and also leader of the GSLP party. You talked about your admiration for Sir Joe Bossano, but of course the party is very different now to what it was 10 years ago, and you also talked about some really, really big losses in the party. How are you going about regenerating the party to make sure that it continues beyond Fabian Picardo?
I've got an even bigger job than either of those two, which is father and husband. But in respect of those two, and in particular as party leader, look, what I will tell you is that it's not just the party that has changed. Politics has changed because society has changed. If you think of what we did in 2011, I was on Facebook, this thing called Facebook, and I was establishing that social media could be relevant in the context of a Gibraltar election campaign. Sir Peter hated one particular video I did, which he described during the course of the budget debate in 2011 as a grubby Facebook video, which we are still talking about sometime these days. So that's impact, if nothing else. But the social media has developed a lot since then, and there's been even more changes in the way that you can run a party. And the pandemic, if nothing else, has taught us that you can have meetings without having to be in the same room. Sometimes one of the difficulties that you might have when you're in government is actually getting yourself down to party headquarters in order to be able to have the meeting at a particular appointed time. So I think that technology has really changed the way that we interact with each other in the political party, and will change it even further. And what I want to do is to ensure, as Joe Bossano ensured, that there will be somebody ready to take the reins in the GSLP, that the person who takes the reins will be able to keep the GSLP in power. If we've lost power, he or she will be able to take the GSLP back to power, because I believe that with the GSLP in power, Gibraltar is safer, and that the key to Gibraltar's long-term prosperity is to have the energetic drive and approach to Gibraltar's economy and public finances that the GSLP bring. And that is very much work in progress. There is a lot of work being done at a grassroots level in the GSLP, never enough. And people will say, well, you're not doing enough because we haven't yet seen anybody say that they want to take over from your leadership. Well, look, watch this space. It could happen at any time, and I think that would be a healthy thing. And I'm very keen that the person who becomes the next leader of the GSLP will know that Fabian Picardo will always continue to be a part of the party, ready to support the work that they're doing. The GSLP has helped me to become Chief Minister of Gibraltar, and that has been the greatest professional and political privilege that I will ever enjoy, and I'll never let the party down in continuing to be in administration in Gibraltar.
Is there a natural successor at this point?
If there were, it wouldn't be up to me to tell you. That person should emerge with the support of the members of the party and the executive of the party.
You don't have to give me a name, but is there someone?
I think there is more than one that could potentially be the natural successor coming through the ranks, and that's the two great non-familiar loves of my life, the GSLP and Liverpool, are known for bringing people up through the boot room.
You have always said that you would like to have 3 terms as Chief Minister, and then you would give it up. But your language has been a little bit more ambiguous the last few times you have spoken about it, and we're in very difficult times. We're emerging from this pandemic, which has been catastrophic in many ways to many economies, and we still have Brexit to sort out. Would you consider remaining as leader of the GSLP and also Chief Minister, going for Chief Minister for a fourth term?
So I've been deprived of the first 14 months of my third term by the pandemic. So we were elected at the end of October, and by February we were dealing with the pandemic. We were almost not able to deal with Brexit issues in some of this period. We had to put down the Brexit issues, as had the governments of other European nations, and just deal with pandemic issues. That has really stopped me from being able to deliver most of the manifesto. I've already said that we planned a manifesto to be deliverable even if there was a hard Brexit, but not to be deliverable post-pandemic. So the first half of this third term is obviously going to be one given up to COVID. And therefore, I feel I've been deprived of the opportunity of taking Gibraltar in the direction that the people of Gibraltar thought that I should when they elected me as Chief Minister for the third time, given me a mandate to deliver on that manifesto for a child-friendly city, the green Gibraltar that we would all like to see. Haven't been able to do much or any of that, and may not be able to do much or any of that in the coming years, because COVID has gutted the public finances of Gibraltar, as it has the public finances of every nation in the world. And my son Sebastian is seeking to persuade me to offer myself for the leadership of the GSLP again. And if the GSLP decide that I should remain their leader, then it's very likely that I will ask the people of Gibraltar to support me again.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk about the personal cost, though, because everyone that works with you, and even the media, we know that you are always there on social media, that you work very, very long hours. If you need to be reached at at midnight for some reason, you're always there. How do you balance? How do you get that work-life balance? You have 3 children, you have a wife. It must have quite a toll on you personally.
So I can tell you that, having come to politics from the law, from one of the most demanding professions there can be, and in particular from one of Gibraltar's largest law firms, working hard is second nature. I mean, I didn't choose to go to university not to work hard. I chose to make my choice of university the hardest one I could. So that doesn't scare me, and it doesn't scare my wife, who is a fundamental support to me. Without her support, I would not be able to be answering your emails or your WhatsApps whenever you needed, and everybody else's whenever I needed, because, as you say, we also have a family unit that we need to look after, and I am unfortunately relatively absent from that on occasions when I would wish not to be. And if there's a reason that I will decide not to stay in politics when the time comes, it will be because of my family. I can enjoy my children, but I can't enjoy them as much as I would like to enjoy them as children. They will soon grow up. I can already see, Sebastian is getting so tall. He was born after I became Chief Minister, and the little ones are already starting to become characters of their own. And I need to ask myself whether I have been enough of an influence in who they're becoming, or whether I've been absent too much. This is true of every professional father. In politics, you sometimes are involved much more than you might expect. So because I have the support network that my wife gives me, and that my family gives me, I'm able to be available. If I didn't have Justine, then that would be much, much harder. In fact, without Justine, it would be impossible. But the way that we have worked together to ensure that our family is able to give me the opportunity to do this job means that I can do it 100%. And if I felt that I could only do this job at 90% of my capacity, I would not ask the people of Gibraltar to support me again if the time comes, because I think whoever becomes Chief Minister of Gibraltar has to be ready to give 100% of their energy to the job. There is no hiding place in number 6 Convent Place, and there's no hiding place as the leader of the GSLP either, because people demand, if you take that job, that you're available 100% of the time. Look, Joe Bossano is a demonstration of that. You say I'm available whenever necessary. Joe is usually up before me and asleep after me in his 80s. So you've got to have that desire to give your all, and it's because what you're doing is not something that you're doing just professionally or politically. It's what you want to do all of the time in order to make sure that your nation is protected, prosperous and growing.
You do get targeted on social media. I mean, that's the downfall of social media, is that you're under enormous scrutiny, and on top of that, politics is very adversarial as well. I mean, you saw off your biggest political foes, Sir Peter Caruana, Daniel Feetham as well. We all remember that, time when he stepped down as leader of the GSD. It can all be quite very personal. Doesn't it ever get to you?
Look, I think after you've been in politics for as long as I have, I was first involved in 1991, with the launch of the Gibraltar National Party. I've trained as a barrister, which is by its nature an adversarial profession. I didn't train as a solicitor, I trained as a barrister. In other words, somebody who goes to court to argue a point against somebody else arguing the opposite, usually, right? And you have to have the intellectual respect for the fact that the person is putting a political argument, and you battle it as a political argument. It doesn't mean that you have to fall out personally over it. You may or may not feel harder done by at the end of a particular debate. You may or may not wish to sit down and have a beer with that person on that particular day, but it doesn't have to affect your relationship at a personal level. We're not setting out to destroy each other personally. I think the key factor for me is to have the strength to know that you have a better argument. And if you have a better argument, you defend that better argument. And if one of your opponents decides that he is going to go for you personally, you deal with that just like you deal with every bully. You take them on harder, and then they never come back. And look, at people on social media want to single me out and say stuff. Well, look, they are just demonstrating what's wrong with social media. They're not edifying themselves. They're not advancing their electoral chances against me. And some people who are not in frontline politics think that by throwing a dart that might hurt, they might somehow create a better electoral chance for the team that they support, or otherwise. Social media is a bit of a bubble in that respect. You have to get under the skin of the real Gibraltar in order to succeed electorally. And you can't just do that behind a keyboard. That's part of how you communicate in the modern world, but it's not how you build relationships with an electorate in the modern world.
So to close, Mr Picardo, you're raring to go still, happy to be re-elected as leader of your party and to stand for the next general election.
If the people who make up the membership of the GSLP, who are the people who decide who the leader of the GSLP should be, decide that I should continue as their leader when we head into the next general election, then look, I will have to have a conversation with my family at the time. And as long as they take the view that they take today, then it is very likely that I will once again ask the people of Gibraltar to give me their support to lead Gibraltar for another 4 years. We're a very long way away from that yet. A lot can happen between now and then. The one thing I never take for granted is my health. I have to look after my health. I look after the health of my family too. That's fundamental. As long as we are okay in that respect, and as long as Justine is prepared to support me through this process, and the members of the GSLP want me, this is a particularly difficult time. And as I said to another GBC interviewer before, I will never say no to Gibraltar if I believe that Gibraltar wants or needs me.